And as always, you can find all of our historic recordings and workshops at our website. I will go ahead and put some links in the chat. So please go ahead and take a look. If you've happened to miss any of those presentations, you can always peruse those during your leisure. I'm pleased tonight to introduce Meryl Nanasi from New Energy Economy, who is going to be giving us a wonderful presentation tonight on maybe not a wonderful topic, but I'm excited to have her present. And Norm is going to be presenting on the crisis with with the Rio Grande Compact. So again, I'm just reminding everybody, if you have questions during the presentations, please place those in the chat and I will compile those for our question and answer session. I'll turn it over to you all.
Hi, everybody. This is a great honor to be with you tonight. My name is Mariel Lanassi. This is my friend Norm Gum, and tonight we're going to be talking about economic development. Private equity is coming for New Mexico. Does it matter? It sure does. So first, I want to talk about the Water Quality Control Commission. You don't have to read this for a minute. Let me just tell you what happened. I think many of you know that we spent 18 months, New Energy Economy spent 18 months fighting for a rule because the Environment Department, via Michelle Lujan Grisham, our governor, wanted to prohibit direct discharge, meaning you can't just open up the spigot of fracking waste, which they call produced water, but it's really toxic radioactive waste. And although it's fluid, it's not water. Like you drink coffee, and that is largely 99% water. It's not water, it's coffee. Well, this is fracking waste, and they wanted to treat it with no specific scientific standards and then reuse it for industrial projects and projects that would ultimately lead to spreading of it on agriculture, environmental restoration, etc. And along with Norm Gom, we had three experts, and we secured one of the most protective rules in the entire country regarding produced water. And what we won was no produced water discharge and no produced water reuse, whether that's treated or untreated. The only exception was for pilot projects under strict scientific guidelines and the ability to continue research in the lab. Well, 1 month later, after we won this terrific rule, and we had hours and hours of testimony, cross-examination from our experts, and then also from the opposite side, NMOGA, New Mexico Oil and Gas Association, also put up experts. And basically what they said was the science isn't there. The science is not there to prove that produced water can be reused or discharged. Great, we won. It was a huge victory. And 1 month later, this organization, which I'm actually going to skip ahead. Wait, why aren't you moving now? Okay, this is it. I'm gonna skip ahead to one thing first, and this is the Water Alliance. They said, oh, we are a new alliance, and we have a new petition, and we want to discharge and reuse produced water in 13 counties in New Mexico. But what we found was they were just actually a proxy for oil and gas and the same constituents as New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. And you can see their overlapping membership. And this is just a snippet of the overlapping membership. But the biggest thing is that they're almost all members of NMOGA, New Mexico Oil and Gas Association. So it's just a proxy for the same orgs that had a chance but failed in front of the Water Quality Control Commission. So what happened? They bring this petition, and all of a sudden, the commissioners that made the former decision, just literally a month later, were not sitting there. And we were like, wow, that's fishy. So now I'm going to go back to going forward. Okay. Um, and so we were all suspect about what happened, right? And I just want to give you not a lot of law, but just listen to this. This is the rule. These are the rules. The rules are you got to have a fair and equitable commission hearing. The rules are you can't have impartial, I mean, you can't have partial, excuse me, or unfair commission members. But what happened was that, and we later learned, and now I'm going to, I went over this to you. This is literally the exact quote that in the middle here that the Water Quality Commission ruled. The commission concluded, quote, there is insufficient scientific support for the proposition that any discharges of treated or untreated produced water would be protective of ground or surface water. That's the ruling. That's why they said no, we're not going to allow that. Then what we found was, and this is an enlarged version and a highlighted version, but otherwise it is what it purports to be, which is an email. You read the first one, the bottom one first, because that's how emails go. And that is that Secretary Kenny, and we got this as a result of an IPRA, had said basically this. I'm going to read it because it's just it's unbelievable, really, that it's in writing. Good morning. This is from Cabinet Secretary James Kenny, and it says, good morning. You or your designee or someone who works for you serve on the Water Quality Control Commission. As discussed in the Climate, Energy, and Natural Resources huddle, the administration is supportive of the produced water reuse petition, which is currently pending at the WQCC. Blah, 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 we'll move on. Oops, once the hearing, why did it do that? Okay. Once the hearing is assigned, that person will reach out to WQCC members about scheduling something in person. The preferred location for the hearing is Lee or Eddy County for 2 weeks in late October or early November. Per the governor's office, the statutorily named person to the WQCC will need to participate versus your designee. What does that mean? That means the political appointee that the governor appointed needs to sit his self or herself, not the scientist or the engineer who knows about the Water Quality Control Commission, who we had before when we had our first hearing. Please discuss this petition with your designee or any of those who work for you, on and on. Then, if you have any questions, you should come to me, James Kenny. In addition, state legislators are already weighing in support of the petition and holding the hearing in JAL. And then you go up to the top of the email, and this is from Carolyn Burkle, who is the chief operating officer for the governor. And what does it say? She says, as per our huddle discussion, we need everyone's commitment to get this over the finish line. So basically, James Kenny is saying, number one, the governor supports this. Wink, wink. You better as well. You work for the governor. Number two, we want to have this on a fast track. We want to have this new hearing in October or November. Number three, you've got to sit, not your expert scientist or engineer, Number four, we want to hold this hearing in Lee or Eddy County, maybe in Jal, and it's very important. You see that the importance is high, and then you have the governor's chief officer saying, "Yes, we got to get this over the finish line." So this is very disturbing. It smells like corruption. And what's the worst, what does our judicial system rely on? Fairness and impartiality. That just got a shot. We got a shot. They have all the money, they have all the experts, they have all the time. We're fighting for justice. We're fighting for clean water. We're fighting to protect the land that we love. And yet, what are they doing? They are putting the screws to the cabinet secretary designees because the fair and just commission hearing that we had just held and worked for 18 months. And I'll just tell you that New Energy Economy spent over $100,000 on, and that was without anything to do with my salary, on this hearing. So it's a lot of commitment of time, expertise, and money to defend our land, and we win, and we get a fair decision, a decision that says, look, when you get the science that says you can do this, fine, bring it to us, but not beforehand. And so then what is the governor and her basically in collusion, I think, not only with her cabinet secretaries, but her campaign contributors, what do they say? They say we have no way to deal with all this, the prodigious amount of produced water that oil and gas is producing, because for every 1 barrel of oil they produce 5 barrels of produced water. And so they are out of options about how to handle it. So they told her, look, what about just spreading it all over New Mexico? And she says, sounds like a great idea. And then came up with this proposal, which we won. Um, so, what did they want the produced water for? One of the things they want this produced water for, and you've heard the governor rightfully say, we have dwindling water resources. That's a fact. And she says, without water, we're not going to be able to attract industry here. We're not going to be able to develop economically. And those two words are the scariest words, I think, that are exist right now in New Mexico, economic development. Because what are we going to get for economic development? One of those things is private equity. Private equity is coming for New Mexico, and there's two very important issues. One is that private equity is coming for the gas company. So most of you get your gas, I imagine, from New Mexico Gas Company. Well, the current owner's name of that gas company is called Amera. And then the other major case that's pending right now is that Blackstone is coming for our electric utility. But I want to focus on the gas company first, because that case is going to hearing on November 3rd. And to be honest with you, if we don't win the Bernhardt Capital Partners attempted acquisition of a New Mexico gas company, we probably don't have a chance at winning the Blackstone one. So we need to have your help. I'm asking for your help so we can win this. So Bernhardt Capital Partners is coming to buy New Mexico Gas Company. And when the PRC, the Public Regulation Commission, which oversees both the gas utility and the electric utility, has to weigh whether this acquisition is in the public interest. That's the legal standard. And it applies some factors, 6 factors, to weigh whether that's in the public interest. Well, one of them is to look at what credits, what customer benefits are they bringing. So I want to go through them with you. And just stick with me here because this is what's up. So what they're offering, so Bernhard Capital Partners, as you can see on the screen, I'm going to call them BCP, wants to buy the gas company, and they're offering the first thing that they're offering is $15 million in a rate credit over 12 months after closing. What does that mean? That means $2.27 for every New Mexico gas a customer for every month for 1 year. That's not a lot of money. That's just not a lot of money. And it's certainly not worth the risk of them coming here. That's one thing that they're offering. Then the next thing that they're offering is a rate freeze. And the rate freeze is till the end of 2027, which is basically a year and a half from now. But in utility law, there's a lot of sneaky things that they can do. And one of the things that they say is while we're going to have a rate freeze, we've got another accounting scheme. It's called a regulatory asset. And we want to put that in a different bucket. And that bucket, that regulatory asset is we want to charge you the $56 million, but since we said that we're going to have a rate freeze, we're not going to charge it for you now, but we're going to put it in this other column so that when we do get to start our rate increases again, we're going to get that $56 million. So I literally asked at a deposition of the New Mexico Gas Company, I said, you say that there's going to be a rate freeze and this is going to be a huge benefit to customers and that they're going to save $30 million because that's what your normal rate increase is about. But you have this other column over here, this other financial accounting scheme. And in that column, you got a saved, like, okay, we'll wait. They're not going to charge it to you now, but what you got is a saved $56 million. So really, ratepayers aren't really saving anything. And he goes, I get your point. And so he says, it's a different bucket. He says, at first, he says, it's in a different bucket, though. And I said, yeah, but ratepayers don't experience like, oh, this is in one bucket, that's in another bucket. And this one's in the rate credit, line item, and this one's in the regulatory asset line item. So therefore, it doesn't, it makes a whole difference. Anyway, so I would say that bullet number two is not really a benefit. Let's go to bullet number three. They're going to hold New Mexico Gas Company for 10 years. Originally, they were only going to hold the the holding for 5 years because private equity loves to flip stuff. And a number of our experts, and just so you know, it's not just New Energy Economy's experts, but every single party in the case is opposed to this deal. Every single party. And so we said 5 years, like, what are we, you're going to just flip us and then charge us more later and the new company is going to come and blah, blah. And so they said, okay, well, we'll extend it to 10 years. But how is that really a benefit to customers? If we stayed with our current owner, then that would be a better benefit. So it's not a net public benefit. So I would say, bullet number three is not such a huge benefit. Then bullet number four, shareholder funded economic development. Uh-oh, there that goes that word, those words of $10 million over 7 years. Now, this, first of all, is not necessarily for the benefit of customers. What it is it's going to put money into like the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce or which opposes everything for the people, just it's just good for business. Or they might be like researching hydrogen, another fossil fuel false solution that we don't really want them to invest in. So this fourth bullet doesn't directly benefit us and might actually even harm us. The fifth one says we're going to keep the current employees for 3 years. My answer to that is a whip-de-doo. If they're good employees, you should keep them because New Mexico Gas Company actually is pretty reliable. And to say that you're not going to keep them for the entire time that you're going to allegedly hold New Mexico Gas Company like the 10 years, that's like not a customer benefit either. And for that, BCP is um, paying for the paying Emera for New Mexico Gas Company $1.2 billion. Now, what's the scary part? The scary part is BCP has 3 months of gas utility experience. They don't have any prior gas utility experience. That is a shocker. And that is very, very scary. So I'll just give you an example. Like a couple of years ago, maybe you remember there was a freeze in Texas and the pipes froze and New Mexico Gas Company still delivered gas to us. It cost more, but everybody still got gas, and nobody froze to death like they did in Texas. And so New Mexico Gas Company, under Emera's ownership, did the right thing. And they have gas utility experience, they have regulatory experience. BCP has zero. What would have happened if that storm Uri, that's what it was called, happened under a BCP? The operational inefficiencies of an inexperienced company could be disastrous, could result in fires, could result in freezings, couldn't result with people freezing to death and dying. That's scary. So inexperience matters. Other thing that really matters is they are paying $1.25 billion. Dollars. It's about $200 million dollars more than the worth of New Mexico Gas Company. It's called an acquisition premium that they're paying. What does that mean? That means they will get it from us. They will get it from you and from me. And what that means is that the normal rate increases from New Mexico Gas Company, which are like $1 or $3 a year, a month more every couple of years, which is an increase, but it's not a $200 million increase, which is coming if they get to buy out New Mexico Gas Company. So, what I want to tell you is, I don't believe that um, there is a net benefit for having this gas company be owned by BCP. Um, I just want to let you know that there's just a story. The story is that the BCP bought out a gas utility in Louisiana, and it closed 3 months ago. And what they did there, they didn't have to go through this whole process that we're going through. They just literally gave campaign contributions of $200,000 to the commissioners in Louisiana and got a fast track regulatory approval. So BCP in that case said, we will honor Entergy, that was the gas company that they bought in Louisiana, will honor their billing system and will honor their climate goals. But as soon as they get in, they change their new billing system. And according to one of my experts, there have been a flood of complaints. When you're a utility customer, you don't think about a lot except for turning on your gas, turning on your heat, and paying your bills. And if you got two bills in the same month that were different amounts, that would be a problem. And that's what customers in Louisiana after BCP took over Entergy are facing. The other thing they're facing is something even bigger, and that is, um, and that is, and I'm skipping one to the climate goals. I told you that they promised the commission that they would honor the climate goals. But as soon as they came in, they made a deal with Meta, which is Facebook, to build the largest data center in the world. It is massive. It's 70 football fields large. And for that, Meta said to Entergy, owned by BCP now, we need three new gas plants. Three new gas plants is not consistent with the climate goals of in that were set in Louisiana. It's also bad because while Meta agreed to pay for the gas plants, they need $550 million of transmission upgrades. Did I say that right? And what that means is that a BCP owned Entergy said, well, great, Meta, we will make you pay for the gas plants, but we're going to make other ratepayers pay for the transmission upgrades. So not only do they have the acquisition premium, but they have these other costs that should be paid by the data center, but is instead being foisted onto ratepayers. So what I want to tell you is that the private equity is real, because what they've done is they say that the commission couldn't even see the um, the contract between Meta and Entergy, and yet they still approved it. And the other part is the equity part. They're in it to make money and gobs of it. It's like turbocharge. The last thing is I want to tell you about BCP is that um, in this case, I asked for discovery, and that means I can ask BCP questions about the businesses they own. And they said, well, we'll tell you about the one other regulated utility we own, and that's called National Water Infrastructure. But all the other businesses, we're not going to tell you. Why? Because they're into being private and secretive. And they came up with a term that I'd never heard before, even though I've been practicing for 15 years at the PRC. And they said, oh, that's third party discovery. And since it has nothing to do with the utilities, we're not going to give it to you. And right now I have a motion to compel pending against BCP, because I'm like, you are coming here and we need to see your resume. And you're only going to show it to us for one of your companies, even though you own 70 companies. And they said, oh, well, that would be burdensome to show you all of our fines and penalties and violations. And I'm like, well, you're coming here. We need to know who you are. And that's, in fact, one of the factors that the PRC must consider, which is what are the qualifications of the company that is proposing to own our New Mexico gas utility. Well, the one water infrastructure utility that they have, which serves only 20,000 customers compared to the New Mexico Gas Company, which serves 550,000 customers, orders of magnitude different, water's different than gas. What were they charged with? They were charged by the Department of Environmental Quality for failing to maintain and operate their facilities, and regulators found feces in the water. That is completely unacceptable, and that for them, and that shows us that BCP cares very little about the quality of their service, the health of their customers, and their performance. And again, if that is how they view their responsibility with the regulated water utility, How are they going to view that for the gas company? So I talked to you about shifting data costs and increasing water usage and electricity. Just so you know, just so you get an idea, this plant that I told you about would be the equivalent of a fifth of all of the electricity consumption of Louisiana, all of it, a fifth of it. So, oh, one other thing I want to tell you is this last bullet on this page, which is that the contract between Meta and Entergy is only for 15 years, when a gas plant's lifespan is generally 40 years. So they've only agreed to the plant to pay for that for the gas plants for 15 years. So who's going to pay thereafter? Is that going to also fall on customers? The last thing I want to tell you before I end and turn it over to Norm is this is what Blackstone's preparing for. This is what BCP is preparing for, is for data centers and other kinds of industrial use using produced water for this. And I just want to read to you something from this really excellent report that you might want to check out. It's very short and it just came out in August. It's called Data Centers and the Water Crisis. If you just Google that, you'll find it. It's been done by a friend and scientist, Sandra Steingraber. And what she basically says is data centers consume vast amounts of energy, as we just saw, to power their servers and water to cool them, a practice that strains local water supplies and raises ethical concerns, especially in arid New Mexico. AI and increased cloud computing demands exacerbate this issue, leading to larger, hotter facilities, new energy infrastructure, including gas-fired power plants, nonstop noise, pollution, and rate shock. And that is what I'll leave you with. This is outsized risk for New Mexico. It's about water. It's about skyrocketing costs. It's about creating greater divide between the super wealthy and the 90% of us whose wealth stagnates. Um, it also amplifies the utilities' political power and their infringement on democracy. I told you the story about BCP having the money to pay for campaign contributions before they went before the regulators and then got a fast-tracked yes approval. That's going to happen here. It already does with P&M and the gas company, but at a very low level compared to what these entities, Blackstone and NM, and BCP have. They've all met with the governor already, and they've met with I interviewed them, I deposed them, and they've met with Senator Cervantes and a number of the different legislators. So they're already starting. They've already, putting out the red carpet. Lastly, of course, something that we're very concerned about is it disrupts the needed electrification that we need to transition to. It exacerbates the climate crisis. We see that with these three gas plants, and that's just one example. And then it concentrates power in the hands of people, corporations who make secretive deals and that they're unaccountable to us. There's just no way that the PRC is going to be able to regulate a BCP or a Blackstone. And we're seeing it already in the shenanigans that they're playing. And this is when they want to get approval from the PRC. They're claiming all these new things that they just made up. Like, that's third-party discovery. You don't have a right to know that. And so here we're facing tough times, and we're facing it from the federal government, but we're facing it from this administration as well. And we're facing it because land is cheap in New Mexico, because economic development are the scary buzzwords of the day. And the reuse of treated produced water will be used for data centers and for other things, and it will kill workers. One of our other experts that we put on said that workers who worked in treatment facilities of produced water died at a very young age, died of horrendous cancers. Um, Private equity is like a vacuum cleaner sucking up all our solar, our wind and gas resources, our water, and bulldozing our land at the expense of our grandchildren's future. We deserve better. Please help us fight them. And there's plenty of ways that you can do that. And we can talk about that after, and that's the end. Um, I will tell you about those things in the Q&A.
Thank you so much. What a interesting and horrifying presentation. It's it makes me so sad that we are consistently in this position as New Mexicans. So we're gonna turn to Norm next, but I want to play a reel that we have made, and that reel is up on Facebook. So give me 1 second to get that loaded. Make sure I have all the sound right.
I couldn't figure.
All right, Norm, I muted you. If you want to unmute, please.
Um, Hello, everybody. I'm Norm Gall, President of the Water Advocates. And first thing I wanted to let you know is that reel, the Facebook link is loaded into the chat, and we hope that you will view it and share it widely, please. So I'm going to talk about the water end of this business. Because all of this development is proposed for the data centers are proposed for the middle and the lower Rio Grande. In the lower Rio Grande, we have Project Jupiter, which plans to add a gigawatt of new AI capacity in this huge plant that they propose to build by the end of next year in Donna Ana County, right next to the border with El Paso. In the middle Rio Grande, we are threatened by data center proposals associated with, not proposals yet, but we expect Blackstone to want big data centers in the middle Rio Grande as well. And my message is we don't have the water. We are behind. We have compact jeopardy in both basins. I want to briefly explain that to you and tell you how serious this is. But one thing to say about this, a gigawatt is an incredible amount of energy. It's equivalent to the last unit of the San Juan generating station, the coal plant that was taken offline, I believe. They propose to get that energy from new gas turbines, and they say they're going to get the water in some way that won't affect anybody. but as a professional engineer, I know that's not possible. And I also know that the research that's ongoing as to where the pretty significant brackish water resources in that corner of the state near the border, where those brackish water resources could be tapped in a way that would not affect the Rio Grande. I'm not sure there is such a place, but it will take years, literally, to find that out, even if it's on a fast track. And the governor has put it on fast track, but the realities are that these things take time, and there's no way that water is going to be secured for this plant to be operational by the end of next year. And I just learned recently that chips are no longer sold. AI chips are no longer sold by whatever measurement of power they used to have. They now measure AI chips in gigawatts of load. That's 1,000 megawatts. It's a ton of energy. So thank you. I'm going to share a few slides that will illustrate our water situation. Give me just a second here. Okay. So I took this photograph down at Elephant Butte Reservoir on August 27th. And the level has changed a little bit. It's a little bit lower now. I visited this reservoir in April of this year and took this photograph, or took another photograph, and I compared the two. And I have an arrow that shows you where the water level was in April, and it's a little bit lower than shown in this picture now. And if the middle Rio Grande's accrued water debt that we owe to Elephant Butte, that we owe to all of the users below Elephant Butte Dam, if it were be satisfied, I've estimated where the water level would be if that debt were magically satisfied. It would make a material difference. It wouldn't make a huge difference for the water demands that are south of Elephant Butte Dam. But as an example, the Elephant Butte Chamber of Commerce wants a minimum recreational pool, something that I'm not sure is possible under current law. If our water debt were satisfied, this reservoir would have more than the 111,000 acre foot rec pool that the Elephant Butte Chamber of Commerce would like to have. And I'm going to go through these photographs, and then I'm going to talk to you about the reality of the compact situation in both the lower Rio Grande and the middle Rio Grande. And the dividing line you're looking at in this photo, the dividing line between the lower Rio Grande in New Mexico and the middle Rio Grande is Elephant Butte Dam. So this is a little bit, I'll come back to this in a little bit, but this shows how our debt to Elephant Butte has grown. New Mexico last ran a net credit in 2018. Since then, our debt has accelerated. And it's now very close to the legal maximum, which is a minus 200,000 acre feet. Unless we have a weather miracle, or the state of New Mexico does something incredible to regulate water use in the middle Rio Grande. They've never done that before. They just manage permits, not water diversions. We will violate the compact next year. And what that means is that Texas will sue New Mexico again in a brand new case in the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court hasn't even finished the last lawsuit that Texas filed against us in the lower Rio Grande. Now, I can't think of a worse time in history for the Middle Rio Grande's future to be left to the complete and unfettered discretion of the United States Supreme Court. They have unfettered, unappealable discretion. I've heard Lower Rio Grande proponents say that they're jealous of the Middle Rio Grande, they're jealous of the river we have and the vegetation. I've heard them say that they would like to see the Middle Rio Grande put into a ditch like they've done in the Lower Rio Grande. This is a picture that I took on August 27th. It shows foundations of a resort that existed before the dam, which was put into service in 1916, I believe. There were resorts there, and these are the foundations, the once drowned foundations of one of these resorts. You see the marina in the background, and you see a lot of exposed white rock, and you can see the bathtub ringers. This is on the wet side of Elephant Butte Dam, and the people who own the van and the trailer are camping in the reservoir right next to the dam, which is almost empty. This is what it looked like in August of 2022. This is a professional photograph taken and copyrighted by Mitch Tubin for the Water Desk in Colorado, and I'm using it by permission. And then the other thing I want to tell you before I describe our compact jeopardy is that the Rio Grande water supply over 50 years is down a full third. I prepared this graph and I can see that it is not registered correctly the way I'm showing it here, and I apologize for that. But I divided this 50-year period into thirds. And the mean volume that flowed into the Middle Rio Grande, and that water belongs both to the Middle Rio Grande and the Lower Rio Grande. The water that flowed in was almost 1.2 million acre feet. In the last 1/3 of years, the average is 0.8 million acre feet. So the reduction is a full third. And it's not just the annual volume, it's also the peak flows. In the first 1/3 of years, 10 of 17 years, more than 1 million acre feet flowed under the bridge to Los Alamos to be divided between the Lower and the Middle Rio Grande. In the most recent 1/3 of years, only 4 years have exceeded 1 million acre feet total volume, again, to be distributed in accordance with the Rio Grande Compact between the Middle Rio Grande and the Lower Rio Grande. And my message about this slide is our water supply is down 1/3, but we are doing our very best as individuals to pump and divert as much water as we can, pretending that the water supply is still there. And the state of New Mexico is doing nothing in the Middle Rio Grande to stop that. Now, let me go back to our compact jeopardy. And let me just flip back to this page. But first, I'm going to talk about the Lower Rio Grande. When I was director of the Interstate Stream Commission from 1997 through 2002, Texas was actively threatening to sue us then over groundwater pumping in the Middle Rio Grande. The state legislature invested $10 million appropriated to the Attorney General to work with a state engineer in the Interstate Stream Commission to prepare for that litigation. I was one of the people who met with the Texans and their lawyers, in Austin, Texas, and in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The Texas legislature, who wanted the vacation in Santa Fe, came out in force and met with New Mexico legislators in this marvelous Santa Fe compound, behind high walls. It was just a verdant garden, and the place was so luxurious. They had acquired that place for a 3-day meeting with New Mexico legislators, and they paid for it all. Actually, Enron paid for it all. And by the way, one of the Enron spinoffs is the largest operator of wells and production in the Permian Basin. Now, Texas did not sue until 2013. And I'm not going to go into the circumstances, but they sued. And we've been in litigation before the United States Supreme Court ever since. At the September meeting of the Water and Natural Resources Committee in Taos, the state engineer and the Interstate Stream Commission presented the settlement. And I know from talking to the director that preparing that settlement was overwhelming for the New Mexico water executives. It just ran them into the ground. And one of the big issues we have is the forces of the state engineer and the Interstate Stream Commission are so poorly organized that only the top people are able to deal with these kinds of things, and they don't have enough bandwidth to do that. And part of that they could remedy, I think, with better management and better processes. But the legislature hasn't even given them the funds to automate their information and make it available for decision-making and everything else. The law is on the book to do that, but the legislature hasn't funded it. And further, I understand the governor will not allow the executive agencies that report to her to ask for funding to implement the 2019 Water Data Act, which is a crucial act for New Mexico's future. Now, the settlement requires that New Mexico purchase from willing sellers in the lower Rio Grande 9,240 acres of irrigated land to reduce New Mexico's consumptive use by, I think it's 18,000 acre feet. I don't remember the exact number. But this is going to end up costing New Mexico, by the time it's over, this is my estimate, not the state's, it's going to cost $500 million. And it's all because we don't have our Water Administration act together in New Mexico. So the soonest that this lawsuit could be over is next year. And perhaps it will be. We all hope that it is. But New Mexico then has a tremendous burden to come into compliance, and it's going to be incredibly difficult. In the market down there where water is so scarce, to buy senior water rights from willing sellers. Now, what's the situation in the Middle Rio Grande? Well, the graph that's up on your screen tells the story. And I already said what it would take to avoid a compact violation. I think it's still possible, but the state engineer would have to pull out all the stops. And when the state engineer and the Interstate Stream Commission announced their plans to the Water and Natural Resources Committee meeting in Taos on September 12th, they said that they were going to issue a metering order and begin an adjudication of water rights. And both of those are good things, but they're coming awfully late. The predecessor named organization of the Water Advocates prepared the Middle Rio Grande Regional Water Plan in 2004. And one of the principal recommendations of that plan that's never been implemented is mandatory metering of withdrawals. You can't manage what you don't measure. Senator Cervantes from Las Cruces, a very capable litigator and very good at making arguments, actually mocked the state engineer for too little, too late. He was not impressed that they plan to issue a metering order and to begin an adjudication. But both, particularly the adjudication, is a courageous step for the current state engineer to undertake. So the jeopardy is that we'll violate the compact in 2026. Texas will sue us after the accounting is finished in March or April of 2027. And we will be before the Supreme Court of the United States again over our excessive groundwater pumping and our use of water in the Middle Rio Grande, our uncontrolled use of water in the Middle Rio Grande that belongs to the people below Elephant Butte Dam. And that's my story. I think we'll open it up for questions and answers now.
Thank you so much, Norm, for all of that information. And again, I think it's so important that we get the word out about all of this devastating thing, piece of these devastating pieces of information so that we can work to try to solve this issue before it's too late. So we do have some questions. Give me 1 second so I can get back to my sheet with those. We have a question. Utility rates have only been increasing. Are those credits that were being offered as part of this sale, can they be revoked? Like say, may they revoke to the solar credits?
The rates have been increasing, and this is just the beginning to get to. If Blackstone is allowed to buy the electric utility and if BCP gets to buy the gas utility, as I said to you before, it's going to exponentially increase for a whole bunch of reasons, including the fact that they want to build these data centers, which consume enormous amounts of energy. Can they be revoked? I think something like that was the question. The answer is no. Rates never go back down. There's one time when New Energy Economy and a number of other parties went back and got a rate credit from P&M. You'll remember, I think a year ago, and that was a $10 rate credit that we got when we fought P&M for the closure of San Juan, and they didn't want to give people the credit because solar was cheaper than coal. But other than that, once the rates go up, and other than that one time, I've never seen them go down.
Thank you. We have a statement and then a question. I can't believe our Democratic governor approves. I know we're not supposed to talk politics with the water advocates, but can you offer any explanations of why she may be backing this?
You want to go first or me?
You go first. We can't talk politics. We can talk politics. We just can't talk electoral politics.
The fact of the matter is that, in the name of economic development, there has been basically a rush to ignore science, including the amount of water we currently have, and also the problems that oil and gas are producing in our state. And the fact of the matter is that produced water is a prodigious problem. They don't have any answers to it. And what I didn't talk about before is that they have these ponds, these lime pits that they put some of the toxic waste in. and that they're running out of room, and those things leak all over the place and all the time. The other options for disposal is to just shoot it at high pressure underground, but that's causing earthquakes, and it's causing blowouts. And blowouts are that this toxic waste, this is fluid, and it seeks an escape valve. And what it has been finding is old wells, sometimes improperly plugged or properly plugged at the time, but corroded now, and then it comes back up to the surface. There was one blowout, and you could go look at it. All you have to do is Google blowout October 24, Texas, and just 30 miles from the New Mexico border, there was a blowout, a geyser, they called it, of produced water that spewed into the air for 19 days, toxic radioactive waste. Um, and Texas is really concerned about these blowouts. And so they knocked on the door of the governor and said, we got to figure out another way to deal with all this waste. And so we want to discharge it and reuse it. And we just know that the science is not there, that we can't treat it and we can't to the quality enough that that it can be reused and discharged. It will kill people, and that's the evidence. If you remember, in 2020, the governor said about Trump, hey, you gotta, about COVID, you gotta make your policy based on science, not based on politics. And she was right then. But now she's doing the same exact thing for the oil and gas industry. And that could be cause irreparable harm for us if this doesn't get straightened out. And so then she's basically using extrajudicial methods that are contrary to law, contrary to science, contrary to facts, and it could really harm New Mexico now and for the future.
And from my perspective, the governor came into office just before the election. She published a water policy platform. And I will make that available on our website. I don't think it's up now, but I can make that available. So check our website a little bit, a few days from now. But that really was a solid platform. And I'll look at it again, but I don't think she has done almost anything that she said she was going to do. And this is all conjecture on my part, but dealing with water issues in New Mexico and doing what needs to be done is politically difficult. And I don't think that she wants to face that. But regardless, she's going to leave office with New Mexico in a much bigger mess than when she took office. Another thing I'll say is that I've spent the last 2 days in the Interstate Stream Commission's hearing on adopting a rule to govern regional water planning. And you wouldn't believe the number of public comments that were made before the commission that call produced water reuse in New Mexico abhorrent. And the people that were speaking want nothing to do with it, and they want it to be prohibited. So those are political facts in New Mexico. Now, I noticed that we have one of the founders of the Water Alliance in our audience this evening. And no doubt he's listening carefully to what we have to say. But I think, what we have to say is public. They don't have anything to say public. Everything they do is subterfuge. And Mariel showed you at the beginning of this workshop how devious they are.
I would just like to say that the public is outraged, and there were more public comments in favor of the rule that we adopted, and the outrage by public citizens and residents of New Mexico who said, how could you, you know, change your decision based on this, water alliance, which is an oil and gas front group. Somebody wrote to the governor. I have no idea who this person is. They live in Los Ranchos, and that person, I'm not even sure if it's a man or a woman, just sent New Energy a copy of the letter he wrote or she wrote to the governor. And I'll just read you the last line. It says, as a longtime Democratic voter, I am embarrassed to think that this could happen under your watch and can now only hope that the appeals courts that the appeals to the courts will right this injustice. That's what's happening. People are outraged, and it's really important that you express it because this is how scary. Everything's really on the line here. Money, water, and our future.
One more comment along these lines. In 2024, I was busy in the legislative session, and I attended one of the last hearings of the Senate Conservation Committee where they were hearing an industry bill on produced water. And Secretary of the Environment, James Kinney, and Rebecca Roos, who's now the governor's infrastructure person and really a policy advisor, were at the podium telling lies to the legislature. And afterwards, I went up to say something to Rebecca, but I kind of flipped out and made her cry. And that's had consequences for me, but I couldn't believe what they were doing. I mean, I was just morally offended. I think it's time for the next question.
Definitely. Is it possible to require data centers to use only renewable energy sources?
That could be a possible outcome of one of these different cases before the PRC. There's all these interesting different tactics that some states have taken. Some states say, for instance, now that if there's a data center, that the data center operator must pay for all the energy and all the upgrades that are needed and has to be off grid. Some of them even have said. But I will just tell you that a lot of those are in places that have access to water. So the issue isn't as stark as it is in New Mexico. Yeah,
Right.
but there are different states that are looking at resolutions to certainly the economic portion of this.
Thank you. That leads very directly to the next question, which is, why would the data centers want to come here knowing that we do not have water?
Because the people who are promoting it, including the governor's economic development secretary, don't seem to care. And on to the last question. I'm pretty familiar with solar. It's hard for me to envision the solar array that would provide a gigawatt of electricity around the clock. How many batteries? It boggles the mind to even contemplate that.
Thank you.
Also, just that the land is very cheap here, and they think that they can run all over us. And they have been running all over us with these words, economic development. And if you look at the facts, I mean, the idea, I mean, in the Project Jupiter case, they've given them so much tax relief, and I think $80 million by the Doña Ana County Commission they just gave them. Um, the problem is that it sounds great, like, oh, bring all this economic development. There's a great article that you could look up from that was in Politico about the state of Washington, and it said they too gave them all these tax reliefs, and then it turns out that the legislature was paying something like $250,000 per job. It gave up that much money per job because there was only a handful of jobs that ultimately was created by these data centers. There's definitely construction jobs, but afterwards there's very few long-term jobs.
Thank you. Um, we're going to turn from data center to the back to the produced water real quickly. Money was allocated to study the produced water. What happened to that pilot project?
Well, New Mexico State University and the New Mexico Environment Department went together, signed an agreement between themselves um, to organize the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium. And I was a member of that consortium for its first year in 2020, representing the Sierra Club, the New Mexico Environmental Law Center, and another group I don't remember. And I was appointed to the Technical Research Steering Committee, which required me to submit my qualifications, and I was accepted for that. Well, this steering committee never met. And what the director of the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium was forced to admit under cross-examination in the hearing as part of this 18-month process that we came out on winners on, was they have no data from that research. Nothing. They have no data. They had submitted nothing to the Environment Department to base regulations on. And so you and I know that if they had the data, they would be showing us. You know, they would be celebrating. They would be setting off fireworks. So they claim they have the data, but they don't. This hasn't been demonstrated anywhere. And when I attended the New Mexico Produced Water Research Consortium's annual meeting in Las Cruces last December, I was told that a couple of companies in Texas had discharged permits to discharge to Red Bluff Reservoir, which is on the Pecos River just below the New Mexico state line. And they said they expected the Texas Council on Environmental Quality to issue those permits eminently. Well, the permits haven't been issued, and I don't know why, but it may be because they don't have any data to show the Texas regulators either.
Yeah, I'll just say that we just looked up some of the most recent peer-reviewed scientific studies, and they say that two things. One of them said 94% of the compounds couldn't be identified or tested. Another one said 97% of the compounds, 96.78% of the organic fraction present in the distillate remain unidentified. Part of that is because oil and gas won't tell us what's in the constituents, and part of it is because those chemicals, we do have tests for like benzene and toluene and some things like that, and some radioactive material, but a lot of it we don't even know what it is, and we don't have testing methods to evaluate them. So part of that is because oil and gas hasn't divulged that and they refuse to. But these, the detection methodologies are unknown. And even in this Water Alliance petition, there are allegedly 1,400 or so chemical fracking constituents in the produced water. The water petition only has 300 names that are supposed to be looked at, but there's no numerical values next to them. So on its face, the petition in front of the Water Quality Commission by this oil and gas proxy group is defective. There are no numerical values in order to identify, and then the detection of the different constituents are woefully understated.
Thank you. I think there's a lot of questions in the chat that kind of point to the same direction. What can we do with produced water? How do we get it out of New Mexico? If there's so much of it, what are we supposed to do with it?
Well, that's really not New Mexico's problem. What the oil and gas companies do is they try to externalize all their costs. They try to make society bear the costs that they aren't willing to bear themselves. It's a fact that when you produce Permian Basin oil, which is the hottest thing the United States has going right now, you get, call it 4 barrels of this waste. Well, if it takes $5 a barrel, which is the latest cost estimate I've heard from the consortium, and I've seen no documentation of that. And I don't think it includes any of the cost of transportation. That's the cost of treatment. And anybody who would want to use that water has to come and get it. That's incredibly expensive. But anyway, $5 a barrel for treatment, 4 barrels of produced water per barrel of oil, that's $20 off the bottom line, or the bottom line for the oil companies on profits. I think if they were forced to internalize all their costs, this production in the Permian wouldn't be profitable. It's certainly not at where the oil prices are right now. And so they're trying their best to get rid of it. I had a conversation with somebody who's in the know, and I suggested that what they really want to do is discharge their waste to the Pecos River and spread it on irrigated fields. And he agreed that that's really what they want to do. Let me just tell you right now that it is impossible, not impossible, but totally infeasible to move treated produced water anywhere outside the oil patch. And I'll give you a concrete example. The amount of produced water that might be treated and reused is about 40 million gallons a day. The Eastern New Mexico Rural Water Supply Project, which was started construction, I think, maybe a decade ago or 2 decades. It's an enormously expensive project. It's designed to get about the same amount of water, 43 million gallons a day, to Clovis and Portales. And we haven't been able to afford that. Transportation of water is really expensive because water is really heavy and it's hard to move it long distances. It's not like gasoline or oil and fluids. It's very precious. It's just really hard to transport. And I don't think those costs are factored into any of the costs that get thrown about today. So the question was, what can we do with it? That's the oil company's problem, but what they're doing with it right now is creating major problems for everybody.
Thank you both. I think it's time for us to do our closing round. We have a really great do your part to help with all of this. And Mariel put a link in the chat to give a public comment via letter. So please do that. And then I'm going to share my screen so we can go over the water advocates part. This is on our website. It's on the homepage just below the reel that we showed you right before Norm's talk. So this explains the situation, and then it lists the three things that you can really do to, the two things that you can really do to make a difference. And part of that, as always, is contacting your representatives. This is your state. This is your home. It's, your representatives are there for you, and they're supposed to be representing your interests and your hopes and dreams for the future of this land of enchantment. So please reach out to them. Let them know how you feel about these topics. And again, this is on our homepage. I'm going to put this link into the chat for you. And I'm going to stop sharing this one and I'll go back to our closing slides. So again, that do your part. We're in a crisis. We've been in a crisis. It's getting worse and worse. And, I think a lot of us are scared that we are going to get to a point of no return, but we are not there yet. There are still things that we can do. And so please do take the time to do that call to action that I put in the chat and to write the letter that Mariel had a link to also in the chat. I want to thank our sponsors, our co-sponsors, the New Mexico Water Dialogue, Amigos Bravos, 350 New Mexico, Interfaith Power and Light, and the League of Women Voters of New Mexico. We couldn't do it without you. And this time, New Energy Economy also. Thank you so much for putting the word out about tonight's wonderful presentation. We appreciate all of you, all that you do for water in New Mexico. We're in this together, and we're so grateful to have you as our co-sponsors for these events. If you enjoyed the speaker series, we are always looking for donations. We're an all-volunteer organization. We are also looking for volunteers. If there's something that you would like to do to volunteer with the Water Advocates, please feel free to contact us. There's always things that can be done, and we're definitely looking for a secretary and or treasurer. So if that is in your wheelhouse and things that you like to do, please let us know, and we would be happy to have you join our board. Again, thank you so much for your participation this evening. It was a wonderful presentation, although definitely heavy in my heart for the sadness of what's happening in New Mexico.
Thank you.
Thank you.